All right, everyone, super excited to share this one with you. This episode, we're going to actually unpack a conversation with myself and Eric Machado. He's one of the partners and co-founders of MX Store. It's a company that does over $100 million a year in revenues here on the Gold Coast. Very, very, very insightful conversation. We talk all things business, personal life, families, children. You're absolutely going to love this. Let me know in the comments your favorite takeaways. Thanks so much. Let's get into it. Eric, mate, super excited for this conversation. I think even more excited. I knew a lot about you through Ethan specifically, and it kind of wasn't made as much clear to me. I know we were on that coaching call last week, and you started sharing some wins about your company, and you're like, "Oh yeah, we just last 30 days we did like $9 million," and I'm just like, "Motherfucker knows how to motivate me on Monday afternoon." Can you tell us a little about yourself, what you do? Who is Eric?
Yeah, so I guess I came here from Canada about 17 years ago.
Yep.
I was 23 at the time with my missus, who's now my wife. She wanted to finish university here, and we were supposed to be here for 18 months. And obviously the sunshine and the opportunities got us to stay. The job that I was working at the time, I was doing quite well, and they sponsored me to stay.
Okay.
And I just, was on the hustle, sales, right? And was doing quite well back then and invested wisely. And just learned, to be a super connector, really, right? And network, because I didn't know anybody here. So I had no choice, right? Other than shaking a hand and explaining who I am.
Sure.
And networking and starting to kind of understand what value I can bring to people.
Right.
And then, just over the years, I've become really good in business, man, to be honest with you. My financial intelligence is very high, very good with numbers, very, very good with people, very good with attracting good people, and really understanding the bullshitters. There's a lot of, on the Gold Coast, there's a lot of fakeness on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
And I've seen that a lot throughout the years. And what everyone first, what they do is they buy the beautiful car, and everyone straight away thinks, they're rich and they're doing well.
Yeah.
I drove a shit car for a long time. I was driving a Jeep Grand Cherokee till 2.5 years ago. And
wow.
I was still killing it in business.
Right.
I was just like reinvesting
right.
everything back in. And, I'm just honestly serial entrepreneur, love connecting with people, and all the businesses I have partners in. I don't like doing a lot of things on my own.
Yeah.
I just love the collaboration part.
Did you, how did you get into like entrepreneurship? Because you mentioned like you were sales before, like you were doing sales.
I was doing sales before. So I come from a very blue collar family.
Yeah.
And blue collar area in Canada.
Got it.
So none of my friends are entrepreneurs themselves from Canada. Most of them are in trades.
Right.
And it wasn't until I came to Australia and the whole cliche, rich dad, poor dad, that's the book that I read that really changed the way I thought about things.
Interesting.
But I've always had a really good knack with connecting with people, speaking, talking, and selling. So when I first got here, I got into shower screens and wardrobes. Funny enough, out of everything, my background was actually flooring.
Well,
and I actually path of least resistance, right? I'm in flooring. Let's just go get a flooring gig.
Sure.
Because that's what I was doing in Canada.
Makes sense.
Where I came. And I actually got the job to be manager of Harvey Norman flooring division in Bundle. And that was like a big thing, right?
Wow.
23 years old.
So this is when you first kind of moved?
When I first came here, there was an ad out, went to a couple interviews and got the job. Well, I didn't know a lot about flooring. I knew a lot just because my dad's a flooring installer. My uncle used to have a flooring store back in the day. And 2 days before I was supposed to start, I talked to Jen and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to take this. And she's like, why? I'm like, what? Because I want to try something different. I feel like if I'm just going to get into flooring, I'm just going to fall into that, be a manager at a flooring store and that's it. So started doing a lot of reading. And
so you passed on the job?
I passed on the job. I didn't take the job.
So it was yours. You were like, it's ready to start?
Yeah, I was ready to start. They were quite pissed off.
Wow.
But I just went with my gut. And I ended up applying for a sales position at a shower screen and wardrobe business.
Got it.
So shower screens, wardrobes, mirrors, glass splashbacks, wardrobe internals, walk-in robes.
Any experience in sales beforehand? Like actually
Sales and flooring.
Got it.
Right? But more retail, not B2B. So they basically said, yeah, we'll hire you. We'll put you on a commission base. You got to supply your own car. You got to supply your own phone.
Got it.
And I didn't have a lot of money back then. So I had to get a loan for a $10,000 white Ford Falcon. Well, it was like, I'll never forget it. And then I just pounded the pavement. They trained me up and just pounded the pavement selling shower screens and wardrobes to builders.
Wow.
And eventually I cracked the market into the high-rise market and started doing, so a lot of the high-rises you see on the Gold Coast and in Brisbane back then, I sold a lot of those contracts and started making really, really good money back then.
Yeah. And then, so what was how did you transition into being entrepreneurship? How did that happen?
So I then started connecting with a lot of developers and asking a lot of questions, because a lot of the builders that I was working with, they're working for developers, and I started becoming friends with them. I started asking a lot of questions, and they see me as this kind of young Canadian, trying to hustle his way through, Australia. And I did that by asking a lot of questions and connecting with them. And again, adding value, right? The key is not just to take, it's, don't just receive, but it's about giving at the same time. And I helped them out a lot and vice versa. And then I knew, this is about 15 years ago, the online space was growing. Like the online space was very, very different 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't even Facebook ads and stuff like that. So I then, my finance broker at the time, I was doing quite well, and I started buying properties. And my finance broker at the time, she's a really good networker. Like she used to go to all those BNI meetings, in all the areas, and she was very good at networking. And I learned a lot from her. And I said to her, I'm looking to invest in a business, and I want to invest in an online business, because I seen the writing on the wall, right? It's like going, I want to invest in an AI business, or I want to invest in an upcoming, category.
Sure.
And she said, okay, yeah, no worries. I might know some people. Anyways, a couple of weeks later, she rang me and she goes, actually, I got somebody I want to introduce you to. I said, okay. And it was who is my business partner now, and another business partner. His name's Jake, and he was this, blonde dreadlocks, sitting down with them. They're like, oh yeah, we've got this, we started this, small motocross online store. And they were literally working out of one office, like a room.
Wow.
And it was dropship model.
Wow.
To start with. And it was very, very tiny. It was just an idea at that time. But when I sat down with him, I started asking a lot of questions. And then the next meeting, then they showed me the fancy prospectus. This is what we can do. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to get there. And we've got this gun ads guy in the background, who was like a phantom at that stage. And I was like, this guy's intelligent.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, this Jake guy, he's intelligent. And I'm like, the idea is good. I'm not a motocross guy. I can understand where you're going with it. It makes sense. There's a lot of people that ride motocross. Most of them are in rural areas, and they can't get their gear.
True.
Right. And when they go out on the weekends and they ride and they bash and smash their bikes, they need gear, right, and parts to get fixed throughout the week so they could go and bash it again on the weekend for the next weekend. So it made sense, but I really invested in the people and did my due diligence as much as I could at the time. I was very, very green at that stage still, and did a deal, and I invested in that business. And then that business obviously has grown since then. And at the same time, I invested in another real estate business in the luxury holiday accommodation property management space.
Yep.
With another guy who I actually didn't know at the time, but my missus with a friend, they went out, and her friend, it was one of her mutual friends. And then they're like, oh, you got to meet Eric. You guys will get on so well, And I met him. His name's Chris. And we've been business partners for a long time. And again, just making those connections and asking questions and being in the room. And again, if I don't ask the question to that finance broker at the time going, hey, I want to invest in an online business, right?
So that was the first.
fulfilled.
That was the first company you invested into.
That was the first company, business that I invested into.
Wow.
Yeah, back then, yeah.
And how did you, obviously the founders was a big part of the decision making process, but like, what due diligence did you do to be like, this is a good decision? Because like that's
back then, back then there wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot because there wasn't a lot of like online 15 years ago it was new still. There was, a lot of retail, like even in the motocross industry as an example, there was a lot of, physical retail stores still. So I'm a numbers guy. I've always loved numbers. And when I looked at the prospectus, I was like, I know this is shit. I know, like,
half this is not real.
let me take 50% of this.
Yeah.
Right. But I knew they had a really good ads guy in the background. And I did a little bit of due diligence on that. And then, I just went with my gut as well. And the people, like like I said, when I met him, I'm like, this guy's, Elon Musk kind of level, just different, just wired a little bit differently.
Well,
and, I went and we did the deal, and I was the original and only investor into the business, and we bootstrapped the whole thing.
Wow.
Over 15 years to where we are today in that business.
Well,
and then we've created multiple other businesses within the umbrella.
Got it. What were some of the challenges through that kind of like growth of what seems like a one little office room startup to however many people, what the company does today?
Yeah, it was interesting. So started the drop ship. Then we actually went into a physical retail store, because what happened at that time, because online was so new, everyone had retail stores, and it was a cowboy industry. So what happened was we were getting blocked by a lot of suppliers because these cowboys were ringing them going, hey, these young kids are just selling online. Here I am. I got physical staff. I got a physical retail store, POS systems, bricks and mortar, old school.
Sure.
And they basically came to us and said, that's fine. You guys could do online, but you need to have a bricks and mortar store or else we can't supply you.
Right.
That's how long ago this was.
Wow. They forced you into doing that.
So got a physical retail store, fitted it out, POS systems, stock, and sold retail, and had a tiny little office in the back that we start fulfilling our own orders.
Okay.
And back then, predominantly eBay was a big sector for us.
Sure.
Obviously, eBay's diminished a lot over the years with the likes of Amazon and just Shopify. And that's how that started.
Mm.
And then we just started we didn't sell no bike parts or anything at that time. We just sold some gear and lifestyle products,
Right.
T-shirts, hats, Fox, Nixon, watches, these types of things. And then we started growing, and we started growing fairly quickly.
Was this like with this model at this time, which was quite unique in the market? It sounds like a lot of people were very much retail, bricks and mortar, and this was like online.
Yeah, online, motocross online. There was another company at the time that was doing some stuff bigger than us online.
Right.
And they had a physical retail store, and they actually tried to sue us because of, the name was too similar and this and that. So we overcome that. And they ended up closing down. Yeah, funny enough.
Well,
over time. And we just started slowly, taking over, right? Running ads, growing.
well,
And then started selling more gear and started understanding the market a little bit better. And one thing that it's all about service and range, right? Not about price. And that was the whole kind of vision in the model.
Meaning like people will pay more.
Yeah, so they'll pay more, but we have the range and service. So range is very important, because what you don't want to do is have to go to multiple stores to buy them.
Sure. We've got one glove size.
Yeah.
But, understood.
And then when we started going into bike parts, that was kind of that next growth phase. So from there, we outgrew that, and we had to actually go into a factory, because this was more of a retail presence. So we got a factory with a small kind of office spaces in the front that we then converted into retail.
Right.
And then we went in there and then grew out of that. Had to knock down walls connected to factories, so we took I think we had 4 or 5 factories all beside each other at one point. Then outgrew out of that and went into the next location where we are now, which is in Burley Heads, which we probably, I'd say roughly, between 55 to 6,000 square meters of, including the mezzanine of space.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is, it's been a journey, but there was lots of sleepless nights. There was lots of, I've pissed my money up the wall. I'm never going to see this back.
Sure.
Like there was a lot of, when you're bootstrapping a business, not like you're just throwing money at it all.
Investing capital or something.
Yeah, we're not getting, venture capitalists. We're not getting angels. I was the angel,
Wow.
And when I didn't even know what an angel was at that time,
Was there some moments that you doubted it, or you were like, this
Yeah,
is
definitely.
like this?
Yeah, there was moments where we doubted it, where I doubted it. Yeah, definitely.
What were some of those?
Just when cash got really tight, and we started in GFC, right? So we started kind of 2009, 2008, 2009. And, those first few years, yes, there was growth, but it was difficult. No one was getting paid. It was basically everyone was working for free. The beauty of me, I never had to work in the business day to day, more of a strategic partner. We're very non-corporate in that business.
Right.
So when you look at like having a board, kind of there is a board, it's us, but it's not, we don't believe in that whole hierarchy of the corporate structure. And there was issues, with a couple of the partners, not agreeing with some of the decisions that were being made. And there was one time where it came to me and it was my vote, and I was the last vote because they wanted to vote out the existing director, who's the guy that I backed. And then my vote was either yes or no. Like it was up to my vote because I had the controlling percentage at that point of the decision. And I said, no, he's staying. And they were quite pissed off at the time. And a couple of them, over the time have come up to me and said, man, if you didn't make that decision, this thing would look very, very different right now. And I'm like, so we've got a kind of a different level of respect.
Yeah.
Him and I over that. But these are like, some of those decisions, and I go with my gut on a lot of things.
How do you, because I feel like one thing that I've observed through limited, exposure to you and just knowing what you do and hearing what you do from some of our friends, Ethan here, for example, I feel like you've been able to kind of maintain like almost distance in the sense of like the companies, the investments, the things that you do. Like you're not like actively the front man in there driving them.
Yeah.
But I feel like you have such a kind of wealth of knowledge and you have so much understanding. However, you have that kind of space and a little bit of freedom. Like, is that conscious decision you've always looked to make?
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit in terms of how you try and do that?
Yeah. So I used to play pretty competitive hockey and baseball growing up in Canada. So I always worked with teams, right? And that collaboration was always very important to me. And I've always had a lot of friends. I've always loved people and being around people and the energy of good people. And I just took that and related it back to business. But I never wanted to be, I didn't have to be the guy, right? And I think a lot of people want to be the guy because of ego purposes more than their strengths. And so for me, I'm like, let me align myself with people that can actually, what I call, be the jockey,
right?
Yeah, of the amazing horse. And I've been able to do that over time, and I've just kind of become an expert at aligning myself with these types of people.
Yeah,
it's not only it's only now actually with kind of unemployable and where we're taking unemployable that I'll be starting to take the reins kind of in that position.
Right.
But I got to a point in my life where I'm kind of like, it's good having strategic alliances and strategic partnerships and having really good deals, that are done. But at the same time, you're not the one that's in full control all the time, even though I have a lot of control of most of the businesses, right? In regards to, some in shareholdership as an example, but just in strategy, because when you are looking from the outside in, sometimes when you're in the business, you're like a horse with blinders and you don't see the obvious. I take it from a very macro level rather than a micro level. And that's where I add a lot of value into these businesses.
How do you do that? How do you like what makes a good partnership in your perspective in terms of like how do you conduct those things into, is it like a skill set of like, this is what I can bring, this is what I can see that you have that I don't have, like how's that process?
First off, you have to set expectations up front. So I'm very, very big on communication and setting expectations on what's expected by everybody that's involved. I've done it the other day. So we have a business at the moment. We have another guy that wants to get into the business, right? He's like, I just want to come in, because what happens is the more success you have, right, the more people you attract. It's just the way it is, right?
Fixes most problems.
Yeah.
Massive success. Yeah.
And now that I'm starting to, I've got a lot of credibility, but I'm, creating that relevance now, a lot more people see that.
Sure.
And setting those expectations up front is very, very, very important, right? I'll give you an idea. When one guy is single, works like all he does is work, right? The other guy is married with kids, right? And I'm like, you got to set those expectations, because when you got to go home at 5 o'clock to pick up your little girl from daycare or take her to gymnastics, as an example, you got to make sure you're not going to get pissed off because you're going to be working till 10 o'clock and he's not. How does the resentment not get built? So as an example, setting those expectations up front of who you are and who you're not. And a lot of people don't know this, right, about themselves. Who are you? What are you really good at? And what aren't you?
How do you do that? How do you have that? Because like my next, I was just thinking like that comes with a reasonably high degree of self-awareness.
Very, very.
To be able to say like, this is, I suck at these things. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But, and a lot of people have never done that before, right? They try and be everything to everyone. If you're everything to everyone, you're nothing to anybody.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not a fire starter, as an example, right? So I'm not the guy that'll come up with the great idea, start it, create the landing page, right? That's not me, right? I understand tech, but I'm not as tech savvy probably as someone like yourself, right? I know how to attract good people, right? I know how, I'm an investor, right? I'm good at collaboration. I know how to connect people. Like it's just a superpower of mine, as an example, right? So again, those are just a few things of understanding who you are and who you're not. Like Adam is an example, unbelievable fire starter, unbelievable. That guy can come up with an idea within a week, have a full blown business with a landing page and process, and he's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Right.
That's a major superpower of his. Yeah. You look at him and you look at his speaking skills. I don't think I've seen anyone else that I've surrounded myself with, right, even as a business partner or just acquaintance, people close to me, that can speak like that, right? Like that's a superpower, right? So you got to really understand who you are, again, and who you're not, and setting those expectations up front. And open communication is key. To me, the best decision always has to be for the business, not for you, not for me, not to put mine in my pockets or your pockets. Has to be with the business in mind all the time. That and a lot of people don't make those decisions. They make it based off emotion and they make it based off ego.
Yeah.
And we all have egos. Don't get me wrong. I got an ego. You'll have an ego. We all have them. And I think they're great to have. Yeah. But you got to know when to bring it in and when to kind of put it on the shelf, because you can make some very, very, very bad business decisions.
What do you think gets in the way of like young entrepreneurs today in terms of like when they're starting their businesses, and like what would cause someone today to fail in your perspective from what you see?
A lack of patience.
Yeah.
That's probably number one. Right now, social media has created this kind of instant life, right?
Yeah.
Everything's now Uber Eats. You get whatever you want within half an hour, right? You want a date, you want a girl, you go on Tinder, you swipe right, all of a sudden, they're at your doorstep. Like I didn't grow up.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, neither actually
with that, right? Yeah.
With a lot, 10 years.
Yeah. Right. Like you had to go to the nightclub or you had to go somewhere and you had to meet people. And so I think patience, right? People young people want instant gratification and they hop around a lot. So they actually don't give the amount of time to the business, right? What they look at it is they go, MX, as an example, was never started for money. That was never the play. The play was to make riding safer and more accessible to more people. Fight HQ was never started to make money. It was started to change as many people's lives through mixed martial arts.
Interesting.
Right. So having a very, very, very deep vision, right, unemployable for me, right, is not just about money, right? Is to try and wake up as many people to say, you need to be in business or have some kind of side hustle, right, to afford the world that we are in and the world that we are going in. Like I just posted something this morning. We were at a lunch a couple of days ago and we were paying, and behind the glass case was all the patisseries, right? Pastries. And I looked at it and there was a cronut, which is kind of like a donut. You know,
yes.
Donut.
Sure.
It's a donut.
Yeah.
$12. And I'm looking at that going like, yeah, this is where we're going. You know, like your 9 to 5s, it's not going to work anymore.
No.
Right. So you need to have a deeper purpose on why to do something. Right. Like in your business, as an example, yes, we all start businesses. There is a monetary side, but if the purpose, I think, is deep enough and you have that much belief in it, the money will always come. And I know it's cliche, but any business that I'm in or that I've invested in, right, is long term. Like the businesses I'm involved in, like MX Fight, you know, MX 15 years old, you know, Gold Coast rental property, you know, over 15 years old. You know, Longevity, 8 years old. You know, these businesses is for the long term. Like when we started Unemployable and you're starting a podcast, right? It's not for 6 months and you're not doing it for the money, but you're not doing it for 6 months. This is a long-term play. Like we've been going for 12 months. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this podcast, right? And we're at 4,400 subscribers on YouTube, right? And then when you talk to guys like we've met Steve Bartlett, Nowak is an example, right? We went to one of his events and we met him. And he's like, at that point in time, he's like, you guys have more subscribers than I did. Well, at that same point in time, right? So you start looking at that and you're going,
you measure yourself based on that.
Yeah. Now you start looking at 5 million subscribers. But everything takes time. But every pod we release, every pod that gets put out, subscribers take over, right? Subscribers take over. And that's the thing in business. And I think young people, right, have so much, there's so much knowledge at their fingertips, which I think is overwhelming at times. When we grew up, there was no ChatGPT. No, Google was pretty average. You just have to kind of figure shit out on There's so much distraction now. You've got Instagram, you've got YouTube, you've got X, you've got TikTok, you've got like, and I know like even just me with Instagram, how much time I'm on that platform, right? And it sucks the life out of you.
It does.
Right? Yeah. And if you're not focusing on your business and you're distracted all the time, it's, like my parents' generation, my mom's been at the same place. She's worked basically 2 jobs for the last 45 years.
Has that
loyalty is the next level. The loyalty now, there's no loyalty.
Has that kind of like because I respect that so much in terms of that long term like stick with it mindset. But has that ever had negative kind of impact in terms of like you stuck with something too long and it's kind of like gone bad, or been in a relationship too long, or you generally pick that?
Generally I've been okay. Right. But I think some people, sometimes you need to cut the cord, right? And again, if your ego gets into play because you don't want to be judged because of a failed business or a failed relationship, like, stay together for the kids. Well, I don't believe in that. Yeah. Just keep the business going, even though it's shit and sucking the life out of you just because you don't want to be judged. I don't agree with that. Yeah. I haven't had those experiences, but I know that, even with our coaching that we do, I have a lot of very difficult conversations with some clients going, you've got a dead deer on the side of the road here that you're trying to revive. Just let it go.
Get back in the car and drive.
So just let it go. So it's it's one of those things where it's hard though, right?
Yeah.
Because, I'm raising my kids like never give up,
Yeah.
never give up, right? But there's times where
Never give up, but
yeah. But there's times where, especially in business, where if gets a little bit too hard and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's some shit businesses. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
There's some amazing businesses,
of course.
and then there's some shit businesses, and you got to just have just a good business IQ. And if you don't, ask a lot of people around you what they think that have the experience, because I think a lot of people get into businesses that they actually don't want to be in.
Yeah.
Right. And then what happens is it just turns into a shit show because they're showing up to something every day that they actually hate. And how are you going to succeed doing that when your energy's not there?
How do you take that patient kind of mindset? Because like I'm thinking about that in terms of even just how I like rationalize decisions and things, and I can be pretty impatient, and so like I could imagine like the way that you're perhaps like thinking about investing in something or starting a bit partnering in a company, like you're not thinking about like the next like 12 months or next 24 months. You're like, what's the next 10 years? Can I see myself doing it for 10 years? So like how do you rationalize that depth of decision making as far as like I'm looking at making a 10-year decision here? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I wasn't like that before, and I think like that a lot more now. And because I've been in business for quite some time, and I've been in multiple businesses for that long, it's just something I'm accustomed to. Like I now know what it takes, right, to have a business from nothing and where it can go. Whereas we overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we could do over a long period of time. And that's just the way it is, right? It's like training at the gym as an example, right? And you go to the gym and you go for the first 6 months and you go 5 days a week and you see no fucking results, right? But if you go for 12 months, that's when you start seeing. So for me, I'm accustomed to it. For someone, I think it needs to be in you. Some people just have that level of patience, and others just don't. But the way I look at it is like, how can you do anything amazing if you're trying to do 10 things on your own?
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you're doing 10 things and you're investing in others, that's fine. Right. Because you're spreading your risk.
Sure.
Right. Trying to back the right people and the back businesses and business ideas. But if you're trying to do everything yourself and you're spreading yourself too thin, it's difficult. Like Unemployable as an example, we haven't run ads, right? For the last 12 months, we haven't run one ad. Everything's just been organic. And the clients that we've got on, anything's been organic. We'll start running ads next year, but we're not ready to start ads yet, Because once you start running ads, that's when it just goes absolutely bananas. And we got to put a few other people in the right place, right, for us to scale to that level, rather than just going, all right, let's run ads now.
Good.
Let's go push. Let's get all this revenue in the door, and then all of a sudden you can't give the level of service that you need, and then you've got this funnel that people are dropping out of. It doesn't make any sense to me. So again, it's just
like that. How would you like? Because I feel like that mindset and that kind of like philosophy to think that way. Like if a lot more younger entrepreneurs think like that, they'd be a lot more successful and over a lot longer period of time. Myself included. Like when I first started, it was just like gung ho, let's go, looks good, acquiring customers, push it. So like if there was one or two things about that principle that you're talking about right now, which I think is like so fucking valuable, what would you really pull out as the main ingredients of that? Of that patient kind of mindset,
the patience piece. Knowing what you're willing to go without, because with patience, right, means you're not going to get everything today.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get the fancy car. You're not going to travel business class, right? You're not going to be traveling the world. You're literally going to be in that business day in, day out. And if you can't answer that question and be like, I'm okay with that, that's fine. But if you answer that question and you get very, very uncomfortable with that, that's going to be a problem.
Right.
Because everybody wants the fancy watch, everybody wants the fancy car, and it's because of this, right? We've got this phone in front of us.
Correct.
That most people right? It's just a fugazi, right? You're looking at these people and they're posting certain things, and it's not real.
Yeah.
You know, they're renting cars, they're renting airplanes, they're doing this, they're doing that. And especially the younger generation get sucked into that very, very, very heavily. And that is one of those things where I would probably, another thing with the patients is, if you always compare yourself to these types of people, it's going to be very hard for you to be patient, because you're going to be like, I want that now.
Yeah.
And because I want that now, instead of spending another 100 grand on stock, I'll spend 50 grand on a watch, and I'll spend 50 grand taking my girlfriend overseas to Dubai and look like a rock star.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas that 100 grand compounding over and over and over again. And that's where a lot of my successes come from, is just that compounding, that dollar compounding year after year after year.
Before months down
here, you know, and some of it's boring. Some of it's very, very exciting. But I've been on the edge of my seat most of the time, because you got, you know, ups and downs and peaks and troughs. Nothing goes up in a perfect line, right?
Yeah, of course. So I just had a question about the patience thing. It just slipped my mind.
You have no patience? Is that why you like this?
No, I just think it's such a relevant topic, because I think it's something that people just don't have enough of. And I think that so many people quit, or they don't even actually, like, I filmed a piece of content about the other day where I was like, failure just comes from people just like not doing something long enough and underestimating like how actually fucking hard it is.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, oh, like it's going to be about this hard. And it's like, bro, it's actually about like 10 times as hard. It's hard. You know, it's going to take 10 times as long, and you're probably going to burn out. That's the question I was saying. So I think that sometimes like you can be more patient, or you can have more maybe like appetite for fluctuations if you do have more kind of like capital as well behind you. You know, you won't make as much like rash decisions. Your decisions will be made over a bigger time horizon. So is that part of that goes into it, in terms of you maybe like having more capital that allows you to see further into the future, or you've just always kind of thought that way in terms of like a real long-term perspective?
Yeah, I've the more capital you get, probably the more patience that you will get. Yeah, for sure. And the older you get. But I think there's a point in time where you get less patient at the same time, especially with, not in business, but just in life. Like, I'm very patient in business, but I'm not patient, right, when it comes to getting shit done. Like, if you ask my wife if I'm patient, she'll say no.
Interesting.
But she doesn't see me select day out work. Yeah, it's a life for faith. But she doesn't see me day to day and work in kind of, she just sees the outcomes, right? Oh, wow, yeah, this is what's happened. Oh, we sold this business, or we've done this. So day to day, I'm not patient in regards to working with people. Like, I'm like, let's get you done. Let's push, right? Kind of toe the line, you know?
Yeah,
toe the line. But for the outcome of the business, I've learned patience, because like, you look at Bitcoin as an example, right? Like, that's patience. That's a patience game, right? Emotional intelligence, patience. Yeah, I've talked to so many people in the past that, you know, I didn't have any Bitcoin back then, and then like, oh, I had this, but I wasn't patient. I just, you know, sold out here, and then people look back. Property, same thing, right? Just, it's patience. Buy something today, you hold it for 10 years, you're going to make money. You buy something today and you sell it in a few years in a market that changes, and you panic, you have no patience, you're going to go, oh shit, property is shit, as an example.
Yeah. What's you seem very like relaxed and composed overall. Like, I feel like you just have such a calm wisdom about you. What things you know, maybe like make you fearful or kind of get you on edge day to day today?
In business?
Just overall, yeah.
Overall?
Yeah, what scares you?
I like to be in control, right? So when I'm not in control of something, that's when my anxiety starts to peak.
Got it. What's an example of that?
An example of that is so if I'm in traffic, heavy traffic, this is funny, right? If I'm in heavy traffic,
I was not expecting this.
Yeah. And it's pissing down rain.
Yeah.
And it's heavy traffic, I get very uncomfortable. Because I feel like I'm stuck and I'm not in control, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, yeah, I could just fucking run over everybody and get to where I want to be. It's like, you're in that moment, you're stuck here, deal with it. Whereas if somebody's like, hey, we're going to do a business deal. All right. Yeah. Let's transfer. Okay. We got to transfer $500,000. I'm like, all right, next. Zero anxiety.
Wow.
Zero anxiety.
But the trap.
So me, it's more kind of in control,
Yeah.
right? Like me being in control. That's why I don't drink alcohol. I haven't for fucking 20 years.
Well,
I don't drink coffee. I don't microdose. I don't, like
no substance. Yeah.
man, there's so many people that we've been interviewing lately, like ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is like people are talking about doing ayahuasca and DMT, like it's fucking, yeah, no problem. I on the 18 ceremonies, like scared shitless of that.
Well,
because of that being out of control state, even though it might be amazing, right? But within business, I don't have a lot of fear in business. I still have fear around money. Losing money.
Interesting.
I've been raised in a very supportive family, but very scarce mindset. I didn't come from any money. Our families don't come from any money.
Sure.
My parents, my grandparents were poor. They came from Portugal.
Yep.
To Canada as immigrants and just